The coronavirus crisis has brought serious distress to local economies and advertising along with them. The New York Amsterdam News has partnered with the local media association during this unprecedented crisis. Help us continue our important work of chronicling the life of blacks in New York and consider making a donation to the COVID-19 Local News Fund. Go to givebutter.com/Amsterdam News to donate. It's Thursday, April 16th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. We continue our coverage of the COVID-19 outbreak with my guest David Banks, who is the president and CEO of the Eagle Academy Foundation. He's going to be speaking with me about how education is being impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent decision by the city to close public schools for the rest of the year. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced last weekend that New York City public schools will remain closed for the rest of the school year. While the Department of Education has implemented remote learning, some 25% of the 1.1 million public school students still don't have the proper technology to participate. Education leaders and advocates say more needs to be done for every student to have a fair shot when schools open back up in the fall. And we welcome you to today's podcast. We're so happy to have you. And I certainly hope that everybody's doing well. I know that some of the news that has been broadcasted that you're seeing on television and even reading in our publication is a little bit daunting. But I think that a lot of our leaders are trying their best, especially here in New York State, to do the right thing to get us back on track. So we certainly hope that you could be encouraged. Just want to talk about a few stories that we have in the paper this week. The first one, of course, our education story, actually something that I wrote, talks deeply about how COVID-19 is infecting education. As you know, the mayor recently announced that schools will be closed for the rest of the school year. However, I was talking to Councilmember Inez Barron, who we had in our last episode, and she said on the show that some 25% of our public school students still don't have the necessary technology to be able to press forward with their education. So we just want to make sure that everybody has a fair shot. So you can read that story in there. We have a lot of great quotes from a lot of people, including the CEO and president of the New York Foundling. That organization has a wonderful charter school here in the Bronx where I'm at, called Mott Haven Academy. And what it does, it's pretty much the only school of its kind here in the city that caters to foster children and homeless children and children who are in the child welfare system. And so all their children have the technology. But he has two ideas that I want you to read about in the story that could help. I'm not going to reveal them here, but you can go online on our website or you can pick it up on newsstands about his ideas. The other thing that we have is a story actually by Stefan Johnson, and that deal it's a doctors and elected officials advise New Yorkers on how to deal with COVID-19. Really great story by Stefan about some advice from black doctors and black elected officials on what should be done to slow down the spread of COVID-19 and to help our community. Another story, very sad story that Nayaba Rinde wrote about the passing of Minister Abdul Muhammad, who died from COVID-19 recently. He was the Eastern Regional Minister and representative for the Nation of Islam, and he passed away from COVID-19, and Nayaba did a wonderful tribute to him, also on our website and on newsstands. Please definitely read that. And then finally, in our arts and entertainment section, the Billie Holiday Theater is actually presenting its stay-at-home reading series online starting on April 18th. And it's bringing together writers, directors, and actors from across the country from within their own homes to read plays on Zoom. And you can definitely go on our website, amsterdamnews.com, to read all of those stories and more. And, of course, you can pick it up on newsstands. All we ask is that you do it safely, practice social distancing, and, of course, please wear a mask. I'm sure you have heard that Governor Cuomo is now asking everybody to pretty much wear a mask out in public, especially on public transit. And when social distancing isn't possible, so be sure to do that. Well, my guest today is David Banks, who is the president and CEO of the Eagle Academy Foundation. He is the founding principal of the Eagle Academy for Young Men. It is the first all-boys public high school in New York City in over 30 years. He's with me to discuss his thoughts on education during COVID-19 as well as some other issues. And welcome to the podcast, David. How are you?
Doing just fine, Josh. How you doing?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you so much. Now, full disclosure, I have to just put it out there. Your son, you have a very good connection with the New York Amsterdam News. Your son, Malcolm, was one of our interns a few years ago, so I hope he's doing well. And we even to this day, we appreciate his service. So please thank him for me.
I'll be sure to do that. I've got 4 children. He's the youngest
Right.
of my brood, if you will, and he's doing well. I thank you. I'll let him know that you said
Wonderful,
that.
wonderful. Well, let's get started here. I want to know your thoughts on the mayor and the chancellor closing the schools for the rest of the school year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that is the right call. I know that the governor recently said, hold on, that he'll make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see any way that the schools are actually going to open back up. I think we're still very much in the midst of this pandemic.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of questions that are still unanswered. A lot of people are very, very fearful for their health and safety, as well they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the very beginning, I never thought that we were going to be coming back to school this year.
Okay.
And that a lot of our efforts really ought to be spent on focusing on what this post COVID-19 schooling will look like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'll be back in schools this summer either.
Oh, okay.
I think there may be some level of connection and training for teachers, which is how I think they should really use the time this summer.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I was not surprised. In fact, I will tell you, Josh, I thought that the mayor was slow on closing the schools. The rest of the city had shut down and everybody else was closed, but he was keeping schools open. He said because he wanted to have a place for the children and first responders to go to.
Absolutely.
But he didn't need to keep the entire school system open to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're in a better place now.
Okay. And it's interesting. I had another expert from another charter school who told me that possibly opening the schools this summer, just not the entire school itself, but just maybe even having a portion of the school, like say a building, for example, maybe open for an hour a week or a couple hours a week during the summer so that students can catch up. Which leads me to my next question. What are some of your concerns about what's going on with the remote learning? And before you answer that, I do want you to tell us, I know that I announced earlier that you are the president and CEO and the founding principal of the Eagle Academy. Tell us a little bit about what Eagle's doing. I know every school is different, but what's Eagle doing? Are your students equipped with the remote learning material? What's going on there?
Yeah. We've got a network of 6 schools,
right.
All traditional public schools from grades 6 through 12. We've got one in every borough and one in Newark, New Jersey as well.
Mm-hmm.
3,000 young men across all of our schools from grades 6 through 12. And this is a tough deal. I mean, the schools have just closed down as quickly as they did. And then for teachers to have to be activated into an online learning space where we've not received the right kind of training and support in doing that. This has been very difficult. I think at Eagle, we're doing better than other schools and other networks of schools by far because of the level of coordination that we have and the level of support that we've also been able to provide to our schools through the Eagle Academy Foundation that I head up, where we've been able to buy more laptops for our young men and making sure that everybody is taken care of. But as a system, this has been a tremendous challenge. From a student perspective, you're talking about a lot of young people, first of all, who do not even have the laptops. Right. They don't have those Google Chromebooks. The DOE has made an agreement with Google, and these things are rolling out, but they're rolling out slow. There are thousands and thousands of kids who do not have access to the laptop. You have lots of families who are sitting in their homes right now where there may be one laptop and there are 4 children.
Right.
And then they got to share that across the family. So increasing the access through the actual having the actual laptop is important. Then there are also lots of families who are sitting in places where they don't have the actual access to the internet. A lot of free internet has been provided over the last couple of weeks. But a lot of times you get what you pay for, right? There are a lot of places where the internet is very slow, and people are not able to activate the proper way. And, online learning is very different than in-person learning in our schools. And our children and our teachers are used to being together, where even some of our best kids are used to, a level of validation that they get from their teachers in school. Yeah. That's very difficult to get in an online learning platform. So, and then you look at places just like the Bronx, right, which suffer even greater challenges.
Exactly.
A lot of the things that are foundational to COVID-19, high asthma and high blood pressure and those kinds of conditions that already are now exacerbated in some of the most challenging places.
Right.
And then you've got kids who are the people who are actually going to work. It's the people who are custodians. It's the grocery workers. It's the firefighters.
Exactly.
It's the kids So a lot of those kids are home. Many of those kids are home trying to navigate this stuff by themselves. Department of Education has opened up regional enrichment centers, and a number of kids are taking and families are taking advantage of that. But there are lots of kids who are home by themselves trying to make sense of all this on their own, and it's not easy.
And so one of the things, we actually had Councilwoman Inez Barron from Brooklyn tell us the same thing that you're telling us. She herself is a former educator, and she was explaining the same thing you're saying, is that for every child it's different. You know, doing this remote learning is not a one-size-fits-all situation. And there are kids out there. One of the things she mentioned, and I'm hearing from other education experts as well, is there are a lot of kids who are already dealing with a lot at home. And so doing the remote learning is not necessarily the best, option. It's not an easy thing. And I can even say for myself, I remember I was in college, it's about 15 years ago, and I graduated in 2006 from college. And I remember online learning was just starting to come in. In fact, I think I only took 2 online classes during my senior year of college. And that was when online learning was just starting to become a thing and more colleges were starting to pick it up. And so it was not too hard, but having to make the deadlines and staying on task and trying to read, because it was mostly a bunch of reading and answering questions.
Right.
And so based on your schedule, it might not be easy for your household. It might not be easy for you. Do you have any ideas or plans of what we can do? Because one of the things that I keep hearing from a lot of educators and education experts and advocates is that what's going to happen in the fall is schools are going to open back up and there are going to be kids that are going to be left behind. And so this whole situation can be detrimental for a lot of students, and the damage can last a long time. Do you have any ideas of what you think should be going on to make sure that none of our students fall through the cracks?
Well, I would say there's going to be damage. Damage has been done. The die has been cast.
Okay.
There will almost be no avoiding that, completely. What you're talking about is how to mitigate it so that you're not suffering more damage than would be expected. Because the reality here is that even when we go back to school, kids are already going to be behind. There's going to have to be a very significant plan put in place by the leadership at the Department of Education around how we transition back into school. Kids are going to be at different places. Kids are suffering. You have a lot of kids right now and their families suffering from mental health stress.
Absolutely.
Right now.
Absolutely.
This is deep stuff that's happening. So to be September, if we go back to school in September, that will not be an ordinary school opening, right? And so we have to talk about how we prepare to meet our children where they are, the social, emotional needs that need to be in place to deal with the mental health and the stress and the trauma that our kids are experiencing right now every single day, and it's going unsupported, and they're going to be in. Listen, if you're a mom or dad, and you're at home and you've got a nice home and you've got jobs that afforded you the opportunity to kind of be home and there are multiple devices in the house and there are lots of books to read, right? Like for the most part, your kids are going to be okay. They will transition back fairly smoothly. But the vast majority of kids in underserved communities have a very different experience. One thing when you've got kids, they got their own room and they got a backyard, but it's a whole other deal when you're talking about you got 4 kids in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment and just trying to find a space within the house itself to study is very, very challenging. Yeah. And then you got challenges with the stress from the family. So my suggestion is really simply about the leadership of the DOE needs to be organized. It needs to be coordinated. It needs to be reaching out to community-based organizations to make sure that you're getting them online around what the transition back to school should look like. Okay. If the DOE is trying to do it simply by themselves, they're only going to they're not going to be able to hit the mark in a maximum way for maximum impact.
Right.
This is a moment where you have to engage the village. You've got to get other people who are supporting education. Our families have to be involved. Our community-based organizations have to all be called to the table. That is not what I have seen happening so far. We're in the middle of a crisis. And in the midst of this crisis, Josh, the DOE has not put out a clarion call to other organizations who support education to say, we need you all to come to the table so that we are all planning for this current reality that we're in. And as we get ready to talk about the summer and the fall, how can organizations be supportive? We all must be working together. That takes leadership. that takes vision. That's what's required more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We're hearing so much news about task force for getting the economy back, for opening back up the city, but I'm not hearing anything from any leaders, any politicians about what needs to be done to get the schools back. What is the task force to, make sure that education is where it needs to be? Because you're right, this coming fall is not going to be like a regular fall, and a lot of the students are going to be left behind. And I just want to talk to your point about yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you got think about the children that you have right now who are, English language learners and not even getting the access to the translation services that they need for what they are currently. So if you're a young person at home right now and you have the laptop and you have access to the internet, but you have language issues and that hasn't been fully rolled out. So there are so many things that have not been addressed right now that can be addressed right now. So there's a very slow kind of response to that. I think folks are trying, but I think the biggest thing is that they've not figured out how to engage the broader community in this fight. That's what it's going to take to solve it.
Absolutely. And I just want to address the issue you talked about, mental health. The fact of the matter is that lots of students are dealing with some are dealing with illness within their family. Some are dealing with death within their family. Sometimes not just one person, but sometimes two or even more people who have passed away that are close to them. And so I'm hoping that that's something that's addressed as well. One area that I did want to talk to you about that is now starting to become a big topic among a lot of educators. Your students, a lot of them are high school students. I think all of them are high schools. Is that correct? All your Eagle Academies, they're all high schools, right?
Yeah, they're middle high school.
Middle high school,
6
okay.
through 12, grade 6 through grade 12.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You had seniors who were graduating, who are going to graduate from high school, and are pretty much a majority of your students end up going to college. What are you hearing about that? Because I'm seeing that college is even going to have to change from the admission process all the way to the fall and how things are going to work. How are you helping guide students, and what advice do you have for families with high school seniors who are graduating this year, who are going to college? What's your take on that, on higher education?
Yeah. So on the higher ed space, I think, first of all, the colleges across the country are grappling with this issue as well. And so no definitive answers even from there. Okay. Many of them are still, our students are still getting their college acceptances coming in every day. We've got probably 50% of our students have already received a college acceptance. Mm-hmm. So those acceptances are still coming in, right, in spite of the fact that, they didn't get a chance to fully finish out their senior year or otherwise take these state exams, these Regents exams, which have now been, waived for the rest of this school year. And I think colleges recognize we're in a different kind of place. So everybody's playing by a slightly different set of rules and standards as it relates to this year's graduation. Mm-hmm. If I'm a parent at home, I'm making sure that I stay in contact with the leadership at my school. At Eagle, we have a college coordinator at every one of our schools. So somebody whose whole job is focused on the college admissions process. Not every school has that, right? So our Eagles have the benefit of that. Right. And that helps them with their overall articulation into college. But if your school doesn't have that, they've got a guidance counselor. They have somebody whose primary responsibility is that, and that now is the time to be in touch with them and to talk about how to make sure that all the things that are necessary in filling out those applications, the financial aid forms, all of the things that are attendant to going to college are being done now. Parents have the time now to really lean in on this and make sure that those things are happening. So I think some of the things that we're hearing from our kids who are seniors in particular, the fact that they're not going to have a graduation ceremony. Right. They're not going to have a prom. Mm-hmm. Those once in a lifetime kinds of opportunities. Yeah, I know. So we're already making plans now to say, while it won't happen for you right now, to be resilient. And we've got some plans to do some other things. So next year, we plan on hosting a Eagle-wide graduation, right, for all of our Eagle seniors who will, next May, they'll all be back home from college, right, if they go away. Right. And so early June, we're going to host an Eagle graduation for this particular class. That'll be an interesting dynamic, right? It would be, many absolutely. Of them are going to be in their first year of college. But to be able to, and not just for them, but for their parents. Yeah. Think about the mom, dad, grandma who wanted to see their grandson walk across that stage. So mm-hmm. that's an opportunity that they've missed. We intend to do that, recreate that for them at Eagle. And schools across New York City can actually do that.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
idea.
just an idea. Yeah, we
So,
want to do a prom.
so
We're
you're
gonna do
talking
it next
about
year.
doing this in 2021, like next year.
That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
for
Yep.
next year. Okay,
And
that's a good
still give them the
idea.
opportunity to do that. And I'll tell you, and you know where some of these ideas are coming from? They're coming from our young men themselves.
Okay.
So the young men, we charge them, help figure this out. This is what it means to be resilient, guys. Resilience can denote creativity and innovation. So if this door got closed, what do we have to do? We don't lay down and cry. We don't fall down. We're eagles, right? Let's be resilient. Let's push forward. Let's figure out a new path. And they're coming up with ideas that will meet their own needs. And that's a beautiful thing to see as they are exhibiting solutions for themselves and then bringing it back to us so that we can make sure that we implement it so that it may not be the best case scenario, but it'll be the best plan B that we can come up with.
That is a great idea, and I hope that other schools follow suit with that. And so that'd be a great thing if all schools could maybe have the students come back in June. It's interesting, you were talking about college, and I was reading that even like down to the ACT and the SATs, those are now being changed to some type of online format. I know that a lot of schools are now kind of being a little more lenient with the situation and not even considering the testing because of what's going on. And so many things are changing and at such a rapid pace because every day there's something different with the schools. One thing I do want to ask you,
right.
I consider you a community leader. You have some wonderful schools and you've done a lot of wonderful work. I know that you've done work as well with 100 Black Men. Is that correct?
Sure. Well, 100 Black Men are the founders of the original
Exactly.
Eagle Academy
Right.
in the Bronx. And I've been a long-time member of the 100.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
One of the things I want to ask you as a community leader, what is your take on how Black and brown communities are being affected by COVID-19? I'll just tell you this. I received a phone call today. Just, I'm working from home, but my work phone is connected to my house phone. And so whenever someone calls, it rings. And I answered a call today from a woman who's, one of the issues right now that I keep hearing is there's a lack of testing, but there's other issues going on as well. What's your take on how Black and brown communities are being impacted by COVID-19?
Listen, we're being slammed by this virus. And what's so interesting about that is when it first hit, there was this notion that you was hearing across the community that Black folk are somehow immune.
Yeah, I
to this
remember
virus,
hearing that.
and this
Yeah.
is for like everybody else. Yeah, remember hearing that? And,
I do.
and then the next thing you know, right. And the next thing you know was like, I don't know who said that, but we've been getting hit harder than anybody. Right. And I think our being hit harder than anybody really comes from the fact that when you talk about folks who are in impoverished neighborhoods, who don't always have the best access to top level health care, and then people who are already sitting with existing conditions. See, that's a huge part of what this is. I'm hearing about so many people who have passed away in our community, and so many of them already had existing issues of high blood pressure and asthma and all kinds of issues where they were already fighting for themselves. And once this virus got a hold of them, their body didn't have enough strength to fight back. And that is because of the pre-existing conditions that so many of us suffer from. And that comes from lots of reasons, including bad eating habits and not having access to good, solid health care. The kinds of things that you see are more connected to the greater income levels that you have. And so, yes, Black and brown communities all across this country are suffering deeply. I think the Bronx is like the epicenter of this thing in terms of the amount of deaths and those who have gotten this virus, followed by Queens, and particularly Southeast Queens. So it's been bad for our community. And our community has gone through lots of trials and tribulations before. We've got to continue to stay focused, prayerful. We've got to continue to work to do everything we can to stay safe. It looks like we're finally starting to level off with the peak of this. That's why you hear more conversation about getting back to work and opening up the economy. We're still a long way from where we need to be. In fact, Josh, until we come up with a vaccine for this, we're not going to be out of the woods on it, right? But,
I have seen that. Yeah, I was reading something that said it was going to take maybe up to 2021 before we even, hopefully, I hope it's not that long, but there are experts who are saying that if we don't find a vaccine, we could be in this situation for quite a while. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And what you're going to see, the new normal, as we start to kind of reemerge, is going to be people going about their daily business with gloves on, with masks on for quite some time, and trying to be as careful as they can be. So it's gonna be a real challenge. I could see kids and teachers coming back to school in September with all the teachers still having on gloves and masks.
Oh wow.
So this new reality is one that we've got to get prepared for. And until they tell us that they've got a breakthrough on a vaccine, it's going to continue to be a real challenge for us, and particularly in our community.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, listen, Mr. David Banks, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast for this episode. We definitely hope to have you back, hopefully maybe when the school year starts or sometime this summer, to kind of catch up on your thoughts on the issue of education and all of this. But thank you so much for being on the podcast.
I appreciate you, Josh. Thank you so much for inviting me. Take care.
That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening. The coronavirus crisis has brought serious distress to local economies and advertising along with them. The New York Amsterdam News has partnered with the local media association during this unprecedented crisis. Help us continue our important work of chronicling the life of blacks in New York and consider making a donation to the COVID-19 Local News Fund. Go to givebutter.com/Amsterdam News to donate.